There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Watson.
Hello. Hi, Boyd.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. How are you?
Oh yeah, I'm good. Thanks.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm just at my launch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very smart.
Yeah, sort of embarrassingly smart, really. Looking around the audience, I feel like I misjudged the situation.
Well, I feel I've underdressed because...
Yeah, I've slightly overdressed, so if you take the average, we've just about nailed this.
But you're actually smarter than you were even on that, on when you're doing the show.
Oh, I never wear a suit. This is the first time since my wedding.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Normally I'd have to die before I was dressed like this, but I just, I don't know, I thought the combination of the Apple Store and the... it's a prestigious event, and also now and again it's nice to not look like complete shit, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. You look great. You look lovely.
Yeah. I feel good.
Yeah.
I start to wish I'd worn a suit for the biggest performance of my career now, but there we are.
Well, which that was.
I suppose it was,
Your
technically, yeah.
homecoming show at Bristol Hippodrome.
In the sense that it was all immortalised on film.
Yeah,
It was probably
yeah.
the biggest one. Yeah.
I watched it last night. I've seen your show a few times, but what struck me watching it again was that it seems so free form. Like some people, I guess some stand-ups have a big topic that's the kind of kernel of the show, and others, kind of do stuff very much structured around certain stories. But yours seems, from when you watch it, very freeform. Is it really freeform, or is it heavily structured and all very well rehearsed behind that?
I'm a genius improviser.
Okay.
The magic comes from nowhere. Well, actually, this was an unusual show, the DVD one, because normally if it was a full... Sorry, I can't help noticing that we're sort of attracting more people that have no intention of being here originally, but we're drawing them in. So this is kind of quite exciting for me. This is how the 24-hour show started. Just a few maniacs, and then next thing you know, people drift. At the moment, there are still more people in the Apple Store not watching the event than watching the event, but by 8 o'clock, my dream is to have reversed that figure.
Yeah. It's a big store, though, so...
It's a big store, but I'm a big dreamer, Boyd.
Fair enough.
It's kind of... this was a peculiar DVD... The DVD record... I'm not allowed to say DVD.
Download.
The show was a bit of an unusual one for me because normally with a sort of festival-length show, I'd have a whole theme and it would be a bit more coherently arranged around that theme. This was kind of a greatest hits thing, which meant that it was kind of grafted together from 3 or 4 shows, which means that it probably... I was jumping around between themes much more than I normally would. But on top of that, there is this sort of about 25% of my shows are just pure chaos, and I'm doing things like eating Pringles or chasing people around, and it's not really possible to plan those things.
No.
And even with the DVD recording, I was, or whatever it might be, a download, I was. I'm
both.
quite old-fashioned. It will be both. It will be both.
Let's face it.
We're obviously celebrating the virtual release here. I was quite keen to make it still a bit sort of shambolic and do stuff like that, because I think it's a shame that on people's DVDs you don't often, you don't normally, they're normally a little bit too sort of rigidly rehearsed, and understandably because it's a massive show and it's a massive theatre. But my shows are sort of all about the chaos, really. So I'm glad that some of that has made it into the actual thing.
Oh yeah. And interesting thing is, on the one of the extras is one of your other shows, an old show from a few years ago.
Yes.
So you kind of get 2. It's very interesting watching the.
It's such good value, isn't it?
It's great value.
Yeah.
It's literally it's buy one get one free.
It's unmissable. It really is. Yeah.
But do you think you've changed much from in that period from a few years ago to now?
Yes, well, my accent's changed, which is awkward. There's a whole extra where I'm doing a show at the Bloomsbury Theatre 3 years ago, and I was fully Welsh. So anyone that didn't know the history would be, understandably, would buy it and think, well, why is he schizophrenic, or how did this happen? And that is a big change.
Yeah.
I think I've generally. Also, the glasses at that point, and it's only 3 years ago, but in this extra, but I didn't have glasses, and I did have a Welsh accent. It's almost like watching my own younger brother or something.
And you're more cleanly shaven.
I'm also shaving. In those days, I used to shave, which is for suckers. It takes ages. So basically, I've undergone a remarkable change. And at that point, I just had a problem with my lung and sort of had not exactly a near-death experience, but had a scary hospital moment. So at that point in 2008, I was sort of full of kind of like joie de vivre and like let's make the most of it. That's gone again. So I was definitely more optimistic.
Good.
But yeah, it's weird. It was really weird for me when I watched the footage for the 2008 extra. I hadn't seen it for 3 years. I never watched stuff back, so it was it's really odd. I think in general I've become sort of marginally more professional. Like I used to frisk around the stage even more. Then I was even more frantic. But I shouldn't really say this, but I had this sinking feeling watching the extra that the 2008 me was actually a bit better. But I think that's just because if you look at photos that you like, oh, I wish I still had that. You know, I think it's just, I hope that that's just a sort of nostalgia, sort of grass is always greener type thing. Hope I haven't deteriorated.
Oh, no. I think the
I think
new
it's
one's
natural.
better.
Probably, I think it's like, you probably do always look back on things and think, oh, why am I not still like that? But it's probably, natural. I think I'm fine. I think
you're fine. I think I'm much more confident now. Like now, you do all the stuff you do right at the beginning. You're there on stage doing the thing with where you're tapping in computer and you're looking at the audience.
Yeah, I couldn't have done that then. In fact, the show that appears, the Bristol show, I couldn't have done it on such a big scale.
Right.
The extra is at the Bloomsbury Theatre, which is only a few hundred people, but at the time it was the biggest show I'd done. And at that point, I wouldn't have been up. I'm definitely better at playing big. I've learned, because it's so sort of antithetical to what I do, really. I'm such a shambles of a comedian and man, and I rely so heavily on intimacy with the audience and on really low status stuff. So it took me a long time to get used to playing big places. Even the Hippodrome on the DVD stroke download is only about 2,000, but that is still quite a lot of people. So I've definitely got better at kind of large scale.
Right. There is a paradox, isn't there? Because you talk about how you're quite introverted, really. And yet,
I don't know why you want to do this.
See, exactly. And yet, you're doing this thing, and particularly now, where you go into the audience, you do these very bold things. You go into a box. There's a whole bit of the box, the bit with the Pringle.
Spoiler.
Sorry, spoiler alert. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very bold stuff for someone who is quite introverted. It strikes me as being a weird paradox.
I think it's always I've always been sort of a little bit of an introvert, and when I started doing stand-up, I was a bit of an extrovert on stage. And as I've gone on, the hi there, if you're new, this is a celebration of a launch. I can't resist the challenge of seeing people. If people drift over, it's like you can buy an iPad anytime. When is Watson going to be in your doorstep again? I feel like I've kind of the poles have become more extreme. So now I'm a massive introvert in real life, but a huge extrovert on stage.
Oh, okay.
So it's almost like the more terrified of the rest of humanity I become, the more I'm going to chase people around in the theatre and go in their boxes and stuff. It is a spoiler, but in the thing starts with me going up in someone's box and one of those private boxes in the theatre and introducing myself from there. They scared the shit out of them. And then one of them offered me a Pringle, which I ate. The first 5 minutes of the DVD is just me eating a Pringle, basically. And I would never have pulled a stunt like that 3 or 4 years ago. But the turning point was I used to do about 2 or 3 years ago. I used to do a beginning where I would be in the audience as the audience came in, and no one would ever give me a second glance. And I would be sitting sort of 2 or 3 rows back, and I'd just shoot up and. Not with heroin. By shoot up, I mean I would hurriedly rise to my feet. No skag involved. And and that was the most fun I've ever had doing a show, because all comedians dread that moment where the first 10 minutes of the show where you go out on stage and it's all a bit awkward. Say, hi there, thanks for coming. Yeah. So I was able to circumvent. So ever since then, I've looked for more and more weird ways to start shows. Yeah. But I definitely, I think it is the case that the more I've become a more sort of pessimistic and basically lonely introverted person. So that sense of release and catharsis is all the greater on stage. The logical extent is eventually I'll be like living in a hole and I'll never see anyone, but I'll do my shows naked or something.
Yeah, at Wembley Stadium. Yeah,
Wembley.
Naked at Wembley Stadium.
Naked at Wembley would be a good title for the next release.
There you go.
Yeah.
Have that.
I will. Yeah, thank you. The cover sort of writes itself.
It does. Yeah. It really does. I was going to ask about, you tell stories about, you touch upon your family, your mum and dad, your wife, all of that. Now, other comedians I know, dare I suggest, often do make stuff up about their life. You know, they'll just talk about, they'll say, my wife.
A comedian falsifying
I think they do.
Of their life.
But yours strike me as being genuinely true. Are they absolutely true, or are you kind of...
normally they're pretty much true with a little bit of comic fabrication or elaboration. That, like the story. There's a story. Spoiler. There's a story about threatening to kill myself over a game of Connect 4.
Yeah, which we've got a clip of. Well, why don't we watch the clip, shall we?
Well, in answer to the question, why don't we? Because it'll be awful for me.
But, okay.
No, we should. We're meant to show some clips.
Yeah. Let's have a look at the clip and then.
La 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 la. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much. That was 95% true, I'd say. And it was true that I was so traumatised by the defeat that the year afterwards, I didn't even enter the Watson Cup. I entered as one of my toys, as a panda, Paddy Panda. And I was still playing against my dad, but I made out it was the panda playing, and I did all the moves with his paw, because I was so scared of defeat. My dad, of course, thrashed the panda. There are a few stories which had kind of... I don't think I've ever completely fabricated a story. I mean, there have been things where real life things have happened and you think, here's a funnier ending or here's a... But I think, I don't know, I think I'm sort of... when you're talking about your family, it's surprising how hard it is to lie, actually.
Yeah.
If I were to tell a thing about my mum or something which was a complete lie, my mum would say, I don't remember that, and you'd feel that pang that you always do when you've lied to your mum. I think I'm quite conscious of my parents and the people that I'm talking about normally actually watching it, and somehow it feels unholy to completely lie about stuff.
And do you get their permission? Do you tell them the stories you're going to tell on stage?
No, hell no.
Oh,
If I did that, my mum would say, oh, I tell you what else happened that was funny. My mum's got this obsession with the idea that she knows what I should be talking about on stage, and she's always come home from work going, oh, you could use this in one of your skits. And but it'll be something like she was at work and she called a man, the man's called Dean, but she called him Bean by accident. And then she said, you could use that on What of the Week. And I'm not sure that will make the 25-minute version.
No.
So basically, if you give my mum a yard, she'll be like basically writing my whole. So I never warn her. Ideally, I would never let her see it because there's no one worse for watching your comedy. You know, just it's so awkward having your parent. They'll have this on at Christmas and it'll be awful, really. And my mum, of course, the way anyone does when it's a family anecdote is just say, oh, that wasn't what happened. What actually happened was Jeff. Well, no, it wasn't Jeff, it was Richard. Poor old Richard with his hemorrhoids and so on. You know, my mum's got no ability to select the details of it. So basically, I never let them... And for years, I actively kept them away from shows.
Right, really?
Not in a hostile way, just like, don't come to this. You know? But when it gets to the scale of this one, you kind of... if there's 1,500 people there, one of them sort of has to be a mum, realistically. Even now, my dad hardly ever comes.
Really?
And I get on very well with my dad, and we're both perfectly happy with the arrangement.
Oh, that's good. That's good to know.
Yeah, there's nothing. It's not a trauma for me at all.
He's still entering the Watson Cup, presumably.
My dad is still playing the Watson Cup too. He's pretty much unchallenged now. It's like that year, the streak that Sampras had at Wimbledon. It's starting to be hard to see where the Federer's going to come from to challenge him, because there's no more kids, of course.
No. And what about your wife? Because there's a bit about your wife who you famously proposed to after one of your 24-hour shows.
Yeah, publicity stunt that.
Does she's happy for you to use stuff about her? She.
Well, luckily it tends to be quite kind of whimsically flavoured stuff. I'm not the sort of comedian that will do. Comedians do sometimes do pretty harsh jokes about their wives in particular, and I always wonder. How is that at home afterwards? Because I'd definitely be killed for that. Right. And I sort of think rightly so as well. Like, I don't think just because you're the one on stage, you get to say stuff. Like, it depends. If it's obviously a joke, I suppose it's fine. But so basically, my wife is fine with it. But then on the other hand, I don't really take the piss. I don't really reveal. Sometimes I do see comedians do material about basically what it's like having sex with your wife in X, Y, Z situations, and it may be a joke, but some of it has to be true. On the other hand, my novels are full of semi-autobiographical detail, and that is probably more troubling to her, I think.
Oh, okay.
But at least a joke, you can always say, oh, that's a joke, it's all fine.
Yeah.
I've heard comedians get out of some very sticky situations, but, you know.
Does she read the novels before do you show her the novels before?
No. By the time she sees them, I'm dead, that's the plan.
Okay.
She certainly doesn't read them before they come out, because then, in fact, no one ever does, because, that's the thing. On stage, it's like, maybe that 20 seconds referred to me, but with a novel it's like a sort of definitive 90,000 word account of the last couple of years of your life, so you can't really let loved ones see that until the last minute, because they'll be able to see themselves written into it. So at least with comedy you've always got that layer of irony, like, oh, I didn't mean that, not so easy to do that with a book. The
other thing I was going to ask about your comedy in general is and that you've written about, because you wrote quite a lot of articles for the New Statesman, which I thought were very interesting, columns. Are you still writing columns for them? Or?
Sort of on and off. Yeah, I sort of ran out of opinions in the end.
Oh, okay. But there were interesting ones about how, kind of your comedy isn't cruel and doesn't kind of enter that world that a lot of other comedy does into at the moment. There's ongoing debate all the time about controversial comedy and cruel comedy, all of that, and yours completely obviously isn't. And is that a thing that it's just that is natural to you not to be like that, or is it a conscious thing you're thinking, I'm not going to go into that kind of territory?
Well, it's a complicated area, really, because I think, for me, it just, like, I just wouldn't feel happy. I'm the sort of person that if I send a text and I think I've slightly misjudged the tone, I'll send a PS text. So, I'm obsessive about not upsetting people and stuff. So for me, it just wouldn't come naturally. And this is why I'm not... I was going to say I'm not very good at. I'll rephrase that because of the presence of my management. I sometimes feel out of... That's not even... now and again, I struggle to adjust to the format of a panel show. Because panel shows are essentially about just trashing everyone in the world. And I don't like it, fundamentally. I think that the shows like that are good, and I'm not criticising any particular show. And in fact, I think some people are brilliant at it without it being cruel. I'm doing this show at the moment with Mickey Flanagan. Flanagan's got some really mean jokes, but he never comes across as an unkind guy. But it just, for me, it's just not... I just don't like it, basically, because I don't like insulting people or upsetting people, so it doesn't really make sense to do that as part. And I can't do it with very much conviction, that's the thing. Because it just doesn't... But you can come across as a real creep, like... I've done plenty of jokes in my time which basically rely on, well, every joke is cruel to someone or something.
Yeah. Or making fun of someone.
Or making fun of something, and the whole of the job is to make fun of life, basically.
Yes.
But yeah, it's not really a sort of moral stance. It's just I feel uncomfortable doing jokes. If I thought that, because there's standard comics defence is always like, you got to have a joke, it's comedy, I pick on everyone.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of my contemporaries now say. But I don't know, Bernard Manning used to use the same defence and say, I think at some point you've got to take responsibility. But the main thing is basically, it's not really a universal moral code. It's just more like, I don't like making jokes that upset people, probably.
Yeah.
I also feel like a lot of comedians are remarkably secure in their prejudices. So they'll do a joke about women. Oh, women, they do this, or, you know.
Yeah.
And... but I'd never feel comfortable making general statements like that, basically. If I did a joke like that, I have to say, of course, I know a number of women who defy this rule, and then suddenly it's not really stand-up comedy, it's more like stand-up economics or something.
Right.
But it does trouble me, because there's no doubt that most of the most successful comedians around have got a crueler streak than I have, and you sometimes question yourself and think, maybe. Having said that, this is why people like Michael McIntyre or Russell Howard, who some people malign for being a bit middle of the road. These people give me hope.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because because your stuff is...
he's never done anything that cruel, but yet he's enormously successful. Russell, again, I think there are plenty of successful comedians that don't victimise people, so I like to think that is still a viable option.
The other thing I was going to ask is that it's about kind of observational comedy as a thing, really, and that who if you had influences on you, or whether really you're... Because on one level, I was looking at the show last night thinking, really, he's just talking about stuff that interests him, that is funny, and almost you could say, well, he could have done that without watching any other comedy.
In a way, I kind of did, because nearly every interview, someone asks who your influence is. They ask it fourth after, how do you get into comedy? Did you really do a 24-hour show? And how do you go to the toilet in those shows?
I've asked it fifth, I think.
You've done really well.
Thanks, man.
But you've sort of asked some... You've asked questions that at least imply a basic level of familiarity with me. So you've already done better than every interview I've done today.
Okay.
I think that sounded really prima donna-ish. It's just really hard answering questions like how do you get into comedy, because there's nothing interesting to say.
No.
As it is, I'm sort of struggling for interesting things to say. I think... there was no real influence on me as a comedian. I used to watch stuff like The Fast Show or The Simpsons because that was what was on. People forget that in the 90s, when I was a teenager, there was virtually no stand-up on TV. There was Jasper Carrot, Lenny Henry. That was almost it. There was maybe you'd seen Eddie Izzard, but so basically I wasn't really inspired by him. I only learned at the time I first did a gig. I'd only ever seen about 5 or 6 stand-up shows. So I've sort of learned it by watching people like, say, Dara O'Brien, Chris Addison. Lee Mack, they're the sort of people I normally... Those people were just getting big when I started. So basically, and I think most comics of my generation were inspired by people that are now our contemporaries, as it were.
Okay.
There weren't many TV comics, whereas now people are coming through that have watched Russell Howard or McIntyre, so they're imitating them. But there are comedians that are incredibly well versed in and they've watched their Pryor and their Seinfeld and their sort of and they've got an encyclopedic knowledge of. But for me, that was never the case. I was into music as a I still am more into music than comedy, really. I don't know a lot about comedy. I mean, I watch the people around me to see what they're doing, but I don't. There are sometimes you're in a car on the way back from gigs and all the other comedians are talking about Bill. I've watched Bill Hicks and I have a working knowledge of comedy, but there was no comedian that I watched and thought I want to be like that until I began to do it myself. Now there are loads of comedians that I steal bits from.
Right. Yeah. So you're not a comedy nerd, really, in the sense that we are really
kind of I'm basically comedy illiterate. I know much more about music or football or wine or most things actually. But in a way, I think that's healthy. Like I think one of my heroes. I was going to say musically, but just in life, is the Super Furry Animals frontman Griff Rhys. Well, the whole of the Super Furry Animals. Yeah. And I learned much more from bands about how you put on a live show than from comedians. And one of the things he said repeatedly in interviews was that he was always just, not necessarily nicking things, but just basically just copying everyone that he ever admired.
Right.
And the result of that is the Super Furries are probably the most unique band of the past 20 years, because if you copy, if you allow yourself to be influenced widely enough, you'll end up with a synthesis which is unique. Whereas there are people that get bogged down with just, I want to be like Eddie Izzard or Dylan Moran, and then you watch it and it is just like that, but shit.
Yeah.
So in a way, I think it's healthy not to... The other thing is what they call the anxiety of influence, where if you see enough really good comedians, you don't want to do it because you think, I can never do that.
So do you deliberately not watch much? Do you not watch much comedy now even? So even though those people you mentioned, do you not watch their shows? Do you not go to shows?
Yeah, because I don't want to watch Chris Addison and think, well, that's just me, but 20% better. Right. And that's what I will think. I don't want to watch Minchin and think, well, I might as well kill myself because he's better. So I basically don't watch people I know are better than me.
Right.
And I don't watch people I know are much worse than me because so that just leaves people who are exactly the same as me.
And you don't like watching yourself either.
And I don't like watching myself.
No,
basically, I
no.
don't like comedy.
No.
I'd much rather watch a documentary. I just watch Mad Men, basically.
Yeah. Oh, fair enough. Yeah.
But I do think in a way it's healthy. I think psychologically, to be doing comedy all the time, thinking about comedy, doing interviews about comedy, and then going home and watch comedy doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Partly because you can't switch off. You're thinking, oh, should I be doing this? And partly just because there's a lot of stuff out there. Sometimes comedians are just talking about comedy the whole time, and I think, is any of you ever have you ever like seen a piano or like a dog or something? You know, there is other stuff out there.
Yeah.
You know, some comedians get unhealthily obsessed with just the way any business people talk shop. I just don't like it. I like comedy. And it's brought me pretty much everything I have. I just don't believe in getting obsessed with the thing you do, basically.
Okay.
But yeah, there is a more serious point as well, which is that it's really damaging to watch people that you might feel it's really fine line though. I watch some things like I read books. For example, I'm a novelist.
Yeah.
And if I read a book that's amazing, I don't feel depressed and think, I could never do that.
No.
The better the book, the more inspired I feel. But that doesn't happen with comedy for some reason.
Right.
If I watch comedy and someone's miles ahead of me, I think it's because a novelist's career tends to be over 40 years. So if I read Ian McEwan, I think, well, that's much better than me, but then he's 60. With comedy, I'm watching people thinking, that's much better than me, and he's 23.
Right.
So
well, just to rub in the fact that you don't like watching yourself, let's watch another clip from the show.
Yeah, why wouldn't we?
So that was a bit about your mum.
It's true, my mum is a wretchedly bad storyteller, because she just overloads stories with detail in that way. It's awful hearing someone tell a story and it's like, this was last Thursday. Was it Wednesday? It might have been Wednesday. And I was just, I was walking down Regent Street, or I might have been. It's actually one of those that's off Regent Street, and the story is actually about being caught by a bull or something.
Yeah.
But they just can't get away from that. If there's a difference between someone that can tell a story well and badly, it's always about fixation with unnecessary detail. I think.
Yeah.
Cut all the detail. And my mum is a terror for it. She insists, and my mum and my dad have this sort of like almost sitcom-esque relationship where my dad just is. Barely ever says a word. So my mum will be saying, "Who's that actor? Who is it, Chris? Who's that?" My dad will go, "Hanks." No, you know. But he's sort of about 50, an American. They play these enormously long guessing games and it'll turn out it was like Hitler or something.
Yeah.
My mum's just one of these people that regularly gets the wrong end of every possible stick, whereas my dad's got a very keen analytical mind, so he just waits till about an hour in, and then sometimes my mum will spend an hour trying to remember someone's name, and then my dad will just poke his head around the door, say "Derek," and leave again. He's basically that's his job in the house.
Would you like to do like a? I mean, you've done panel shows. You've got a new panel show coming up soon. Well, kind of panel show-ish about advertising and stuff.
Yeah.
Would you like to do a comedy based on your life, a kind of sitcom type of thing, a written scripted thing?
Well, yeah, I would. Yeah. I mean, it's tricky because a lot of people, a lot of TV executives watch stand-up and think, how can I've got hiccups by the way? How can we get that onto the TV?
Yeah.
And but I think part of the problem, though, is that I have a fairly unexceptional life. There's a sort of a surfeit of white, middle-class, well-educated comedians. So it works all right in stand-up, but I'd need to greatly exaggerate my life before it would make a... Having said that, I mean, it's something I'm attracted to because I think I'm much better at actually writing. I'm enough of an egoist to think that I'd really love to sort of front a sitcom, but I'm enough of a realist to think that I'm not really an actor. I'd have to be playing someone that was exactly like me. But then Seinfeld did that, didn't he?
Seinfeld, it worked, yeah.
I don't really see myself as an actor, but I probably could pass myself off as a sort of 31-year-old man that can just about do a Welsh accent.
Yeah, I think so. I think so, definitely.
I mean, there's all sorts of ramifications then. It's one thing doing jokes about your wife and family on stage.
Yeah.
If it was a sitcom, it would start to get a bit hairy, I think. But still, yeah.
I don't know.
I think all that,
okay.
The more you talk about it, the more this sounds like the perfect sitcom.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, I will be throwing open to you guys, so if you've got any questions you want to ask Mark, please be thinking of them now. And I've got some questions from fans as well that were sent to you via your website and your blog and stuff.
We got quite a lot like that because sometimes in these situations no one wants to ask a question.
Yeah.
So just in case, we've got about 70 backup ones for the website.
Yeah.
And we also answer some of those I answer some of them on the DVD.
Yes. Which is a good little extra as well.
The thing is just overflowing with extras, isn't it? You'd be mental not to download it or buy it.
You would.
Really
absolutely.
Would,
The bit where you go to the, what's it called, the thing in Bristol with the...
I was quite keen to really load it up with extras because there's so many DVDs, etc. out there. So there's an extra where I just answer people's questions off the website, and they're asked by Alex Horn. It's probably the stupidest extra of all time. But the second stupidest extra of all time, in a good way though, I think, is I went to Bristol Zoo to do I mean, I don't want to boast about it, but I'm in Bristol Zoo's Walk of Fame, and it sounds pretty cool, but it's only people from Bristol. and also I rigged the voting by getting everyone on Twitter to vote.
Yeah.
So there's people like Tony Robinson or Massive Attack that got a few hundred votes, but I got about 40,000.
Yeah.
Something. Just by doing a
Science.
tweet and a blog saying, I'd love to be in a Walk of Fame. Realistically, it's got to be Bristol.
Carol Vorderman is there? Yeah.
Vorderman made it into the... she's on the Insect House, yeah.
Yeah, that's the Insect
But,
House, that was it, yeah.
She opened the Insect House, so
Yeah.
obviously you get a plaque. But I edged out a few. Justin Lee Collins is in there. There's some good names. There's about 100. There's an extra where I went down to the zoo to sort of unveil my plaque with the world's press there. Bristol Evening Post were there, and even the guy from the Post seemed a bit embarrassed. And there was an awkward. Well, the whole day was a model in awkwardness, obviously. But the most awkward bit was the woman that ran the zoo handed it to me and said, congratulations on entering our Walk of Fame. And I said, oh, to be honest, I got a lot of people to vote for me. And she said, we know, wearily. And,
It is
a plaque's a bloody plaque.
Yeah. It is a really funny bit of extra thing. I was going to ask about, before I do throw him to the audience, about the show. The show's about 80 minutes.
Yeah.
Obviously, you do your really long shows.
Slightly longer than a lot of the ones that are out there.
You're right. A lot of them are about an hour.
They are.
But this is my point.
Rip-off.
Now, this might seem a bit geeky, but do you feel there's an optimum? Like, I was watching and I was thinking, how does he know? Why is he stopping now? Like, you could have gone on and on, or you could have done. You felt there was an optimum time.
Well, I think 80 minutes is. Again, it depends on the range of your abilities. Minchin's is 2 hours. But I think in general, for pure stand-up, there's a sort of point where you think, all right, I've heard you talk now. I reckon about 60 minutes even, the length of a festival show is a fair bit.
Yeah.
Obviously with a theatre show, you'd normally I would do maybe 100 minutes to 2 hours. But then you've got a break, if you're having an evening out, then I think you can listen to someone witter on for a while. If you're sitting in your living room watching it, I reckon about 80 minutes is right. A rugby match is about right.
The other thing you say is you talk very fast, which you do, and you talk.
There's about 110 minutes of words.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say. You could have talked a bit slower, and it would have been a 2-hour Minchin-esque show. You would have been fine.
Or a song pads things out.
Yeah.
But I do sort of believe in. I think it should be like. Sort of like in the same way that sort of 3 to 4 minutes is ideal for a single. I think you want to get in there, talk quickly, hit it, and then get the hell out again. Basically, I do think with stand-up there is a big danger of outstaying your welcome, not least because although I try to vary topics as much as possible and have a sort of arc, still it is just you like certain themes that come up again and again. So I do think, not just with me, I know I tend to do myself down, but with almost any stand-up. Minchin's a bit different, all joking aside, because of the enormous range of his... within one show, he covers a lot of ground. For most stand-ups, once you've got a sense of their worldview and the formula of their jokes and stuff, there is a point where you think... that's why Live at the Apollo works really well, because you're only getting about 12 minutes of someone, but even then you feel like, OK, I've seen that guy now.
Yeah.
So I think 80 minutes is plenty. Yeah.
And when you're doing such a free-form thing, which it does feel very free-form...
It was quite.
It was quite.
It was
and then, you will start a story and then you'll go way around the houses and come back to it eventually.
Yeah.
Do you ever completely lose your thread and have to just stop and admit that you've lost your thread?
Yes, you can tell those bits because I say things like, what was I saying?
Right.
But handily, a lot of those have not appeared on the actual cut of the DVD.
Okay.
I basically tend to go off on a lot of digressions and digressions within digressions. And in Mac terms, it's like opening a window and then another window. And there are times when I think, there are plenty of times when I'm standing in front of a largish crowd and think, I've got no idea what's happening.
Yeah.
Luckily, I have a style that's so sort of rambling anyway that people can't tell the difference between me artfully rambling and me freaking the hell out. So I normally get away with it, But I've been known to just say to the audience, what was I saying? And some comedians, if Jimmy Carr did that would look dreadful.
Yeah,
for me,
absolutely.
it's sort of, I'm so conversational that it kind of doesn't matter. But I frequently wish I were more slick and
but if you were, that would be a whole different thing.
Yeah, but I don't really like it about my reviews. Always start with this shambolic comedian doesn't look like he knows what he's doing on stage, but that's part of his charm.
Okay.
But just once I'd like a review that said this guy's good. That's part of his charm. So something to work on there.
Something to work on.
Yeah, I do. Because it's sort of not possible to. For the DVD recordings, I was nervous, and I did have a sort of little sheet of topics to go back to. But in fact, I did not use it once because it's impossible. Yeah. Because it would look... There's no way of concealing it on stage, really. You can have it, on a speaker or something, but it would be obvious. So basically, I just sort of tried to blag it a bit.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, it was.
I tend to think the thing is, the fun of watching a stand-up like me, if there is any fun, tends to be like... is in the whole adventure. Like, where's he going now?
Yeah.
So in a way, coming back to the original topic is less important than just the fun of the digression. So if I don't finish what I was saying, it normally doesn't really matter. I think I'd rather people felt like, wow, I don't know where he's going with this. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah, completely. No, I think I mean, it does feel like you're hanging out with you, for kind of 80 minutes and kind of having a good time, and that would be my interpretation.
Yeah, I think that is the sort of. Yeah, as long as people don't take the hang out with me thing too literally, I think it's basically fine. If you go home and they're sort of in your garden, it's a problem. I think there's no point in pretending otherwise. Like some comedians do naturally adopt the sort of high status, talking down to the audience thing, but it would just ring so falsely if I did that. So I go to the other extreme and basically befriend people.
Yes.
I've been known to, even with the blog, basically I have quite an unhealthy level of personal interaction with people. But I think that's kind of why I got into comedy. I got into it to be loved. So if I can at least have a bit of that, then well, actually, genuinely as well, because I sometimes get criticised for being like too...
Do you?
Yeah, for engaging too much with people. By some people, yeah. But I do think...
On what grounds, though? Why is that?
On the grounds that it looks a bit... that you ought to leave a certain distance between yourself and your fans. Because if it looks like you actually are their mate, then you lose a bit of the mystery or something. Okay. Also... sometimes it's awkward if you have to find them a spare bed and things. But I just sort of think that if you're gonna have a relationship with the audience where it's like, all right, I'm basically your mate, we're chatting, then it's a shame then if they meet you afterwards and you're not like, it feels dishonest to me. Sure. I think I'd like to see that footage. You know.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
If you pride yourself so heavily on being like, my whole act is that I'm just like one of you, then it feels a bit wrong to me to be like. On the other hand, I'm leaving as quickly as I can.
I'll just start with a fairly straightforward question. Graham Band says, would you rather be attacked by a dozen duck-sized horses or a single horse-sized duck?
A dozen horses the size of ducks, a dozen tiny horses, or one enormous duck. Yeah,
basically.
It's the tiny horses, I think, isn't it? Because you can take them on one by one. But it depends how militarily formed they are. Yeah. If it's a dozen duck-sized horses that sort of have me surrounded, then no, you've got to go for the... Oh, it's tricky, this. I sort of almost rather not be in either scenario, I think. No, I'd just rather fight a man and be done with it.
Yeah, me neither.
But no, if I'm pushed, I would rather have a single adversary than 12. Okay. So I'll go for the surprisingly big duck, I think. Okay. I think. I hope I'm not going to be held to this.
No. Well, that's Graham's question. Katie says, when you get to 40, what's the one thing you'd like to...
Carry on.
When you get to 40, what's the one thing you'd like to have achieved that you haven't already?
Well, that is a good and
that's quite an incisive question.
Good question, yeah. For someone with my level of paranoia, that's a cracker. Well, actually, I was talking about this today with someone. It's quite... the trouble is, you always raise your own bar. At one time, I would have been really happy with just this. Yeah. As it is, I wake up every morning and think, I'm rubbish. So because you automatically adjust your expectations, I think, to, it's the same with the football team. At one time, my football team, if we could have just got into the championship, I would have been so happy. Yeah. Now we are, and I'm not really. I'd like...
Bristol City.
Bristol City, yeah. Well, I am happy with the way things are, but even while you acknowledge that you've improved, you always want to do better in life. So I think the ultimate answer is, when I'm 40, I'd like to have found a way to just be content with things, rather than... I'd like to not be constantly pushing myself to... I'd like to still be hungry for whatever, but I'd like to feel at 40 I'd be better adjusted towards my achievements than I am now. But in terms of what I'd like to be doing, I'd like to be doing this, but just better. Like, I'd like to be a novelist still, but just with more readers. I'd like to be a comedian, but just a better comedian. I think the best ambition you can have is just to still be doing what you're doing, but just to have got as good as you possibly can be at it. Because if you start thinking, I'm 40, I'd like to be in a film, or... anything like that, you're likely to be deluding yourself. Sure. If you just think about if your ambitions are just to master your own art, I think that's probably the best ambition. Yeah.
Talking of Bristol, are you still writing your column for the program?
Yeah, I'm not doing it this year.
Oh, okay.
Because like with any sort of regular column you take on, it would always get to Friday morning, and I think, God. But I take an active interest in, and I'm always on the Bristol City Forum. Yeah. But then now, people know I'm a Bristol City fan because I've been on TV. So occasionally I'll come up, and then there's nothing worse than stumbling upon a conversation about you on a forum.
Oh, God,
so I try and stay away from that now. Yeah, so I'm still engaging in Bristol City discussion, but increasingly under assumed names.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's a good game people could play to try and work out who you are from your assumed names on the Bristol City
any forums I ever go on, I've got so many different aliases. You sort of have to, especially the sort of forums I like. Yeah. So you... a risky joke in a shop where they could probably instantly access your entire browsing history. But for 2 years I did the Bristol City match day program.
Yeah.
It's funny. Probably sounds like such a poxy thing to do.
Oh no, it's a huge honour. If you're a fan of, I'd love to do one for Arsenal.
It was amazing. Yeah, it's a wonderful feeling because as a football fan, like I've got an enormous collection of football programs. I've got programs dating back to the 60s and 70s, and I've got Bristol City. Like for every Saturday, I would buy the. Not every Saturday, because half of those games you're away, so it's silly to go if there's no one in the stadium.
Yeah.
But every home game, I would always buy the programme, and you give the guy a quid, and you've got your... So it becomes a real icon. It's sort of a symbol of a simpler, more innocent age of football, the football programme. So if I'd been told one day I'd have my own column, it's really amazing. Yeah. That's a good example of something, though, that when I was actually doing it, it was like, oh, God, I've got to do my column. And I'd have to sometimes stop myself and think, this is amazing. I'm regularly having to tell myself... I'm moaning about, even with someone, I wasn't begrudging doing this, but I woke up thinking, I hope this goes well. What will I do? Will it be all right? And then you have to stop and think, this is amazing, actually. This is fine.
Yeah. Melinda, going back to the questions, what is the one thing that people, upon meeting you, are most surprised about?
My height. I'm always taller than people expect because my posture is appalling. Yeah. And also, mostly people see me on panel shows, so they believe that I'm tiny.
Yeah.
But TV's meant to add pounds, but doesn't really with me. So people think I'm thin but small, and they're always surprised. I'm just about 6. Well, I'm 6 foot, in fact, but I slouch so much that people about 2 or 3 times a day, people say, "I didn't think you were that tall." Wow. The best person ever to say it to me was the lead singer of the Fine Young Cannibals.
Wow. Roland Gift.
Wow. Yeah, I met him in the BBC. And I couldn't believe it because again, I'm never impressed by meeting other comedians or actors because I don't really care about actors, but I am impressed by pop star, anyone to do with music, anyone to do with football. So I ran into Roland Gift, and I was like, were you the lead singer of the Fine Young Cannibals? And he said, oh, you're taller than I thought. That was amazing.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, I drove him crazy.
Well, the next thing is about meeting someone famous. Natalie asked, what's the most impressive thing about meeting Al Gore?
Oh, he's properly big, physically imposing. Not fat or even that tall, but he's just one of these people that are properly... He's one of the few people I've met that have a genuine... I met him because I did a course a few years ago about the environment, and in Australia, Al Gore was there sort of hosting it, and he's one of these people I've met only a couple in my life that you hear about, that when they walk into a room, the atmosphere is sort of instantly transformed. Like when you're in love with someone, and as soon as they walk in, that's all you're conscious of. I'm not saying I'm in love with Al Gore, but it's sort of a crush, I suppose. But I've met, I would say a handful of people in my life that if he was to walk into even this place now, something would change. And it's impossible to say what it is, but that's what is meant by charisma, I think. Yeah, there's just something about the way he holds himself. And it's amazing, of course, because famously he lost out on being the president, partly because of mathematics and cheating, but partly because he was always famed as a politician being really wooden. But in person, he's astonishingly charismatic. I think that American politics just knocks the edges off people and makes them really bland. But in person, I imagine the same with Obama. I imagine a certain type of politician is able to turn it on, but he's just got that thing that you couldn't really describe it. But what the X Factor used to mean before it meant that show.
Yes. Would you still take an interest in politics? Have you been on Question Time yet? Have they asked you to go on Question Time?
Yeah, they've asked me.
I bet they have.
But I'm terrified because it is that's a really big gig. And I think I'd love to do it. I'm going to do it as well. It's just I haven't had a free day. Okay. But I think I would be very nervous doing that. I think because. Like most comedians, really all I want is to be taken seriously, to be seen as an author, to be seen as intelligent, and then this is your chance to look like a real moron. So, and no matter how well versed you are, there's always going to be some rogue question. And
sure.
Also, there's this culture of tweeting and instant feedback and stuff.
Yes.
It would break my heart to go on Question
Time.
Time.
People will be slugging you off instantly.
You go on Twitter and there's 118 people going, this guy's a dick. So this happened to me a lot, but I expect it with panel shows. On Question Time, I'd feel like, that's a shame. Yeah. So, of course, again, the answer is just don't go on Twitter for a bit. But you always know if it's happening or not. Having said all this, it would be amazing. Yeah. And I've been on things like Newsnight, and Newsnight did an election special. I went on, Paxman hosted that. Once you've been with Paxman, you've basically done everything. Yeah. He's tall. And it was amazing. I was really scared. I was really nervous doing it. It's me and Chris Hoon and a couple of other candidates. But then Paxman came on, and it's the Newsnight music and everything. I thought, bloody hell. But then just before we went on to record, Paxman said, I've got an awful cold, and blew his nose. I thought, it's fine. It's one of those moments. Also, I did do Celebrity Mastermind, and that is the most terrifying thing in a way, because for a start, there's the thing of being called a celebrity, you're really not. But then Mastermind is just, even with the...
Yeah,
it was meant to be fun, it was meant to be for children in need, but it wasn't. It was for ourselves. It was for children in need in the sense that it was, part of Children in Need night, but there's no friends out there.
No.
It was...
What was your special subject?
The World Cup since 1966, and I'd taken it really seriously, as you not be surprised here. What's it called? I revised for ages. Yeah. But Lucy Porter was doing Steve Martin, and she had also revised for ages. Dave Spikey had been on before, so he didn't really care. And Stephen Kamos was just dicking about. So he didn't even know anything about his own subject.
Really?
Yeah, his one was the band 5 Star, the 80s band 5 Star.
Amazing.
And the first question he was, I don't know really. But that's the thing. It's not worth doing it like that, because Mastermind, you can be like, oh, I'm a mastermind, ha ha ha. But as soon as you're in that chair, it's a classic thing of like, I wish I'd done more work. Yeah. For the record, I did well, but just lost out to Porter. But I was proud of myself.
That's annoying, yeah.
So I've done the odd intelligent thing where I think that was great. But there's something about question time. People get so angry as well as so self-righteous. I think it could be quite scary. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'd like that. You will do it though.
I reckon so. Yeah. People like Brigstock have done it in cases that are quite similar to me. So I think that would be. Yeah. I would relish the chance to talk about a topic of the day for more than 10 seconds without someone saying, "Is it Cameron?" and getting the point.
Going back to questions, Tom Beasley, I like this question. How does someone as nice as you deal with being heckled?
I just do it with a smile on my face and then go off and cry.
Okay.
Well, actually, heckling doesn't happen a lot to me because once you have your own sort of audience, theatre show, people just get... So one of the most common sort of delusions is that comedy is all like people yelling at each other and stuff. But once you get to even the basic level, where you can tour with your own show, it's been very rare on my own tours that people have heckled. You get in Nottingham, it'll happen, but in the civilised world, you'll rarely be heckled. When it has happened, I used to do clubs and it would happen all the time. Yeah. But in fact, even for someone as nice as me, it's not that hard because normally, and this is a tip if you're thinking of doing comedy, normally if you ask them to if you just say, what do you say? 3/4 of the time, they won't even have the guts to go that far. Yeah, right. Because most heckling in comedy clubs and stuff is just impulsively someone yells something out and immediately thinks, shit. And if you actually take them up on it, then straight away. And what I will normally do is actually try and have a conversation with them because I'm confident that if it becomes a proper battle of wits, it should be fine. But normally they just shut up straight away. Heckling is much less a part of comedy. Having said that, as I say, this is because I've been around for a few years.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure if you go to the Comedy Store tonight, you'll see a bit of...
You'll see a bit of it, and certainly if you go to sort of low-grade clubs. I was once booed off stage with people going off and chucking money at me, but not a lot of money, unfortunately. And like everyone's had those experiences, but it used to crush me. Like it's true that I'm probably too sensitive, stroke nice for those situations, but I reacted to it by thinking you just got to either get good enough to not be in those situations or never do it again. Yeah. I went away from that gig thinking I'm definitely never doing this again, but you survive it and you do you build up. Even someone as sort of flimsy as me does build up a certain kind of veneer of self-protectiveness. Yeah, sure. The bottom line is that you're on the stage and they're not. So if they're going to take you on, they better be funny, and normally people don't want that challenge. Yeah. Sure. There's been the occasional one where the worst heckle I've ever had by a million miles is I did a corporate gig last year for a bunch of bankers, and it was going pretty well, but I then did a dick joke, which I had to do because someone shouted out. There was a lot of like city boys, laddish banter, which I do not relish, but if you're hired to do a corporate gig, you do it. So this guy was like, get your dick out or something like that, and I started sort of riffing on the idea of the logistical awkwardness of me exposing my penis to this room of people. Yeah. And it was quite funny, but it was still on their terms. And then the CEO of the company was this 80-year-old man, and he shouted out, "Stop being lewd or you will not be paid." Oh, no. Atmosphere. And this is Christmas party. Absolutely horrible. I never thought I'd be called lewd. And there's nothing much worse. So then, of course, all of the audience were like, oh, shit, the boss doesn't like it, we better not laugh. Yeah. So the remaining 10 minutes just was played out in this horrible, embarrassed silence. And at the end of the show, I've very rarely prided myself on my career, but at the end of the gig, I said, well, thank you, you were a really nice crowd, and then the atmosphere was poisoned by one selfish man. And then I went off stage thinking, yes.
And this 80-year-old man.
Yeah, and of course everyone was like, oh, that was great, mate. I had everyone on side apart from this sort of Monty Burns figure, but he was just enough to ruin the evening. Yeah. But I really felt like I had the moral high ground, and the bookers everyone was fine apart from him. Okay. But yeah, if you're going to be heckled, you don't want it to be by the man that's sort of paying for it, really.
And I think we've got time for one more question, which I'm going to get picked from Kate W. which is, I like this question. If you could interview anyone, alive or dead, who would it be?
You.
Oh.
Just to turn.
Don't be ridiculous.
Yeah, well, just because it'd be, I sort of.
That would be.
It would just be.
Deeply tedious.
Yeah, but just purely because it's been all you,
Yeah,
you for an hour. Yeah, I'd love to turn the tables.
Okay. Sadly,
this is a tricky one. It would be living, not dead, I think, because of the awkwardness.
Yeah.
I think it's a cracker of a question, actually, because when you start thinking about this, in reality, it would be dead. I guess it would have to be someone like, I suppose, but something like Shakespeare seems like a bit of a... Probably Jesus, actually, just to really get to the bottom of this whole thing.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
You know. But except that then you've got the Hebrew problem, so I don't know. Assuming an interpreter...
Could do Moses first. No.
Yeah, a capable interpreter, I think I'd say Jesus. And certainly when the time...
Oh, sorry, I'm speaking Hebrew. I thought you meant you want to take into account the Old Testament as well. That's what I thought you meant.
Yeah, no, I mean,
No.
On Moses, you've got a whole new set of problems. He's got his blood. I guess you could write the questions on tablets and have them sent back.
Yeah.
But when people ask if you could go back to anywhere, I always say the crucifixion, and because it'd be great to have the lowdown on that.
Yeah.
I'd want to stay around for 3 days to see if he did pull off the old. But also just the Roman Empire it's got to be the Roman Empire. I'd love to either that one. But who would you interview? Or maybe Chaucer, because Chaucer was sort of a literary hero, and again, I'd love to go back to the Middle Ages. So a lot depends on how we conduct this interview.
Okay.
If I can go back to 1396 and interview Chaucer shortly before he dies, no problem. That'd be great.
That's a good answer. I like it. Yeah,
Failing that, it's a cracker, isn't it? Yeah. More realistically, just someone
alive.
A Maggie Gyllenhaal, I suppose. But that's not all about the interview.
Okay. I see. Brilliant. Well, that's about what we've got time for. And just to remind you that you can pre-order Mark's show to download. Just download it on the 28th of November, which is in a couple of Mondays' time, I think. But you can pre-order it now. I did watch. It is brilliant, and you get all those extras as well. And thank you very much for coming. And thanks to Mark Watson.
Thank you very much.